Hi, this is Swan with Swan Amity Studios, and we're doing a little applique today. I'm just adding in a little information. I got the most beautiful phone call yesterday from a lovely quilter asking a question about how I handle interior points like this one on the heart. Now you might call that an interior point, you might call that an inside point. I sometimes call it an indent when I'm talking to my students in class. And I just thought this would be a great opportunity to make a little video for you and increase some of the material I have out there for applique. Now I'm working today with a thread I wouldn't normally work with. This is not the color I would normally go with, but it will really allow what we're about to do to show up on the video. So normally, most of you know that I work with a thread that matches the top. Whatever is the applique shape I'm adding to my block, that is what I normally match my thread to. I am using Masterpiece from Superior as my thread, even though it's not orange. It's nice little turquoise here. And I'm very fond of what Masterpiece from Superior has to offer because it tends to glide through fabric much more comfortably. It tends to tangle less, and I use thread conditioners much less often as a result. So I'm usually very, very satisfied with a good Masterpiece cotton. And here we're going around to the indent. I know some of you are also going to ask me a couple of questions about needles. I am using a size 11 John James Golden Glide needle, which is my favorite. And I really like the Golden Glide needles. That little bit of gold on the needle really does make a difference. And finally, I am also using one of my beautiful thimbles from Jan at Thimbles for You. She did this one, which is a little robin in the nest. My mother's name is Robin, so I just could not pass that one up. And I like these open on the end thimbles. Not only can they be made beautifully like this one, but they're also just a lot more comfortable in the heat of the summer. And it is high heat in Tucson right now, so this just feels great. So I'm going to finish coming towards the indent here. And what I'm looking for is to stabilize this section. And how do we get that done properly? I'm going to come down into my fabric, and I'll point out I'm using an invisible applique stitch, so notice you don't see my stitches on the surface of my applique piece at all. So you will see them just behind the fold of the fabric, but you would kind of have to lift up the edge to see those stitches. And that's what we're aiming for. We're aiming for mostly invisible stitching. When we handle an indent, we are going to make a visible stitch, and that's one of the reasons why I almost always use a matching thread to my applique shape. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to come down into my background fabric, and this time as I come up into my applique fabric, instead of coming just behind the fold like I normally would, I want to come just a couple of threads into that indent. So just a couple of threads into the shape itself. Let's come up through there and see that. It's not many. I'm not sure if you can see that perfectly. We'll let that focus on that for a second. But we're only about 2 or 3 threads into the shape. What I then want to do is take one stitch where I push down into the indent with my needle just a bit and come down into the background fabric and make my next little to the side stitch. Now what that does is stabilize that little inside. We push down on our shape fabric where the indent is, come to the side, and we take a super small bite. You can see how that's only just a couple of threads of my background fabric. And we pull tight. You will see on the surface of your piece a very small amount of that thread that you've been stitching with. So just a teeny tiny little bit, which means if this was a matching thread color, you would never notice that that was there. And then we continue stitching up the other side of our piece, just as we normally would, loading as many stitches as you feel comfortable with. But that is how we handle an indent. We come to the indent, we bring our needle up through the indent portion or that inside point, and we take a very small bite, just a couple of threads worth of that top applique piece, and then push down on the center and bring your needle back into the background fabric. Stitch up the other side. That stabilizes where you have likely made a little clip in your top applique fabric and allows that point to be very stable, stronger than it would have without that stabilizing stitch, and for it to look very neat and pointy. This is exactly what we want. So very much like we stabilize those exterior points, and you've seen me do that in the past. If you haven't, that is a video, or that is in one of my videos on my applique playlist. But check that out, see how easy that is to make that little stabilizing stitch in your interior point or your inside point, and what a difference that can really make for you as you complete anything that has a little inside edge. You might see those on some of my little foxes, some of my raccoons. That is exactly how I handle that, no matter where I find it. So thank you for joining me on Swan Amity on YouTube. Make sure you like the channel so that you can see when things come out again in the future, or subscribe to the channel. That's the right word we're looking for. And we'll take care of you. Remember, as you stitch, stitch happy.